My parents skipped my birthday 3 times because of their golden child's tantrums. But after 15 years, they have to. Growing up, I felt like I was living in a different world from my family. Even though everything on the outside seemed normal, on the surface, we were just like any other family. But the truth was, I was the forgotten one, the older brother by just a year. I spent most of my childhood trying to exist in a home that seemed to revolve entirely around my sister, Emily. Emily had been born with chronic health issues and a physical disability. Her life was a constant cycle of doctor's visits, special accommodations, and a lot of pain. Naturally, my parents did everything they could to make her life easier, which I understood. But what I didn't understand was how that translated into me being neglected. My role in the family was clear from the beginning. I was the healthy one, the easy kid. But being the easy one came with its own set of challenges. It meant I was expected to fend for myself while my parents focused their attention on Emily's constant needs. From as early as I can remember, I noticed the difference. I would get excited about family outings, thinking maybe, just maybe, we'd all go together for once. But it almost always turned out the same. I was either left with a neighbor or dropped off at Aunt Linda's house. It was always something like, "We'll bring you next time," or "It's easier if Emily doesn't have to travel too far today." Those next times never came. It wasn't just about the trips. The little things added up too. Simple moments like playing in the park, going for ice cream, or watching a movie together felt like privileges reserved only for Emily. She needed more care, sure. But that didn't mean I stopped needing love and attention too. But it often felt like my parents forgot they had another child who also wanted to feel important, who wanted to feel seen. I remember my 8th or 9th birthday vividly. There was no party, no special dinner. I woke up that morning hoping, just hoping, there might be a surprise. But the whole day went by and nothing happened. My parents had taken Emily to a concert she had been looking forward to for months. They came back that evening, talking about how much fun it was and how great the show had been. I just sat there, feeling invisible. The next day, my mom realized they had missed my birthday and handed me a $5 gift card she had picked up last minute. It was a kind gesture, I guess, but it felt like an afterthought. It felt so insignificant compared to the effort they'd put into making sure Emily could see her favorite band live. I didn't want to be resentful, but it was hard not to be. As we got older, this pattern didn't change. It was always about Emily's needs, and I was expected to be understanding, not make a fuss. I spent a lot of time alone, often at friends' houses, anywhere I could go to feel a bit more seen. When I turned 10, I remember dropping hints about wanting to do something fun for my birthday, like maybe going to the arcade or having a pizza party at home. But as the day approached, I could tell nothing was being planned. No whispers about surprises. No hidden gifts around the house. On the morning of my birthday, it felt just like any other day. No happy birthday over breakfast, just cereal, and more talk about what Emily needed. She'd been having a rough week health-wise, so I understood that the focus had to be on her, but still, it stung. I went to school that day, hoping my parents would remember and surprise me when I got home. But when I walked through the door, it was clear that wasn't going to happen. There was no cake, no special celebration. My mom was on the phone, organizing more therapy sessions for Emily. And my dad was at work as usual. It felt like any other day, except it was supposed to be mine. But what was the point in saying anything? I knew it wouldn't make a difference. So, I went to my room and tried to make the best of it. The one bright spot was that my friends at school remembered and wished me a happy birthday. They even pooled together some change to buy me an ice cream at lunch. That helped, a little. It made the day feel less ordinary. The next day, my mom suddenly realized the mistake and apologized, saying things had just been so hectic with Emily. I nodded, said it was okay, but it wasn't really. They promised we'd do something special that week to make up for it. But come the weekend, plans fell through again. Emily wasn't feeling up for going out, so we just ended up watching her favorite movies. Dad picked up a pre-made cake from the grocery store, but it was clear it was an afterthought, a consolation prize. Another birthday forgotten. By the time my 12th birthday rolled around, I had learned to lower my expectations. I didn't bother hinting or asking for anything. It was easier that way, not to hope for something that wasn't going to happen. I spent my birthday like it was just any other day. I did my homework, played video games, and helped around the house. My parents did remember to say, "Happy birthday." At least there was a quick hug, a brief acknowledgement, and then back to the usual routine. Emily had a doctor's appointment that day, so most of the attention went to getting her ready and out the door. I think that was the birthday that hurt the most. Not because it was dramatically bad or because anything crazy happened, but because it was so painfully normal. There was no neglect out of malice. It was neglect out of habit. They were so used to focusing all their energy on Emily's needs that mine just didn't register on their radar. It wasn't just birthdays, though. School achievements, hobbies, things I was proud of, they all just kind of got nodded at and brushed aside. As I got older, the disappointment hardened into something else. Resignation. I stopped expecting things to be different. Friends' birthday parties were a glimpse into what it could be like to have parents who planned and celebrated their kids. I loved those moments. I basked in the warmth of their celebrations and then went home to my reality. In therapy, a few years later, one of the therapists pointed out that these missed moments were significant. They weren't just little slips. They were patterns that showed where the priorities lay. During those sessions, I tried to express how these patterns made me feel unimportant, secondary. My parents listened, but there was always an excuse, always a reason why things had to be the way they were. They promised to try harder, to be more aware, but the habits of a lifetime are hard to break. Looking back, I can see how these early experiences shaped my expectations about life and relationships. They taught me not to ask for too much, not to expect too much. That way, you can't be disappointed. But they also taught me about the kind of parent I want to be someday. Someone who remembers. Someone who celebrates each child for who they are, not just for what they need. When I think back to my childhood, I realize just how much of it was spent in the shadow of Emily's needs. It wasn't just the birthdays and special occasions that were missed, but the day-to-day moments that made me feel invisible. My grandparents, however, were the unsung heroes of my childhood. With my parents constantly caught up in Emily's health issues, it was Grandma and Grandpa who stepped in to fill the void. They didn't do anything extraordinary, nothing that would stand out to the world, but to me. They were a source of normality and warmth in a home that often felt cold. Grandma had a way of making even the smallest moments special. She had this old, faded recipe book, and every time I visited, she'd let me pick a recipe to try out together. It didn't matter if it was her famous chocolate chip cookies or something as simple as spaghetti. It was our thing. During these cooking sessions, Grandma would share stories about her childhood, about the mischief she and her siblings got into. I lived for those stories. They were a window into a world where I felt connected, where I wasn't just the forgotten child. Grandpa, on the other hand, was the quiet strength of the pair. He didn't say much, but he had a presence that made me feel safe. Grandpa loved model trains, and the basement of their house was dedicated to elaborate train setups. I would spend hours down there with him, tweaking and fixing. But it wasn't just about the trains. It was about him sharing something he loved with me, something that wasn't overshadowed by the constant worry and focus on Emily. Their house was my refuge. Those days I spent with them were the closest I ever felt to being seen. I wasn't just the other child in the background. They celebrated every little thing, every report card, every small achievement that often went unnoticed by my parents. I'll never forget when I scored my first goal in soccer. Grandma made a cake, and Grandpa set up a little display in the living room with the ball I used in the game. They made it feel like the biggest deal, and that meant everything to me. But of course, nothing lasts forever. 3 years ago, Grandma got sick. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow decline that seemed to mirror the fading of my childhood innocence. Grandma's vibrant energy dimmed, and the kitchen, once the heart of our interactions, grew silent. I watched helplessly as the disease took hold of her. Our cooking sessions turned into brief, strained visits where she would mostly sleep while I sat by her side, holding her hand. When she passed away, it felt like losing a part of my foundation. The funeral was a blur, a procession of people offering their condolences, saying how wonderful she had been, how she'd be missed. I nodded, thanked them, but inside, I felt empty, like someone had scooped out the center of me. Grandpa changed after Grandma's death. The spark that had been in his eyes when he showed me a new train setup or told a joke faded. The basement gatherings became less frequent, and then they stopped altogether. He moved through the days mechanically, as if the routine he had once enjoyed was just that routine, without joy. The model trains gathered dust, and our conversations became sparse and uncomfortable. I think we were both lost in our grief. It wasn't long before the decision was made to move Grandpa to a nursing home in another city. The house, too big, too full of memories, was too much for him to manage alone. I understood the reasoning, but it felt like another anchor being lifted from my life, leaving me drifting. Our visits to him became monthly trips, more about making sure he was okay than about spending meaningful time together. I would sit in the sterile visitor room, making small talk while we both avoided addressing the gaping hole. Grandma had left behind. With Grandma gone and Grandpa far away, my buffer against the loneliness at home was gone. The transition back to the family I knew was harder than ever. At home, everything revolved around Emily's needs. She continued to dominate the household, and I continued to fade into the background. The isolation wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. During family gatherings, the conversation would circle around Emily's latest treatments, her challenges. I'd try to speak up, share bits about school, or mention what was going on in my life, but it often felt like speaking into a void. My words seemed to disappear as soon as they left my lips unimportant, fleeting. At school, I started to withdraw. Friends would invite me to hang out, but I found myself declining more often, opting instead to spend time alone. It was easier than explaining why I was feeling down, why I didn't feel like pretending everything was okay. My friends knew about Emily's health problems, of course, but no one really understood the full weight of living in her shadow. No one understood what it was like to have your own needs and desires constantly sidelined. The worst part was feeling guilty about these feelings. I knew Emily didn't choose her health problems. I knew my parents were doing their best under tough circumstances. But knowing that didn't make the neglect hurt any less. It didn't fill the growing gap inside of me, the place where familial warmth used to live. As I navigated this new reality, I realized that I needed to find new sources of support. I needed new ways to feel valued. I turned to teachers, coaches, any adult who might offer a kind word or a moment of recognition. Each small acknowledgement felt like a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't just the healthy sibling. I wasn't just the forgotten child. I could be more. Looking back, losing my grandparents wasn't just the loss of their physical presence. It marked the end of my childhood in many ways. It forced me to face the imbalance in my family head-on and pushed me to start carving out my own space, my own identity. I needed to be more than just the background character in a family that had always centered Emily. Sibling rivalry is common in most families, but when your sibling has special needs, the dynamics shift drastically. The term rivalry doesn't even seem to fit. We weren't competing on the same level. Emily's needs were always first, and I understood that on a rational level. But emotionally, it was a whole different story. It all came to a head one evening. I was in the middle of a gaming session, one of the few moments of relaxation I had in a house that felt more like a revolving door of therapists and medical crises. Emily was having a rough day, more pain than usual, and she was moody. Mom and Dad were doing their best to comfort her, but nothing was working. That's when things took a turn for the worse. In her frustration, Emily lashed out. It wasn't the first time she'd had a tantrum, but this time, my gaming console took the brunt of her anger. Controllers flew, the console crashed to the floor, and the game I was in the middle of vanished into a screen of static. I was stunned, staring at the wreckage of what had been my only real escape from the stress of everyday life. When I looked to my parents, hoping they would finally see how much Emily's actions were affecting me, all I got was a hurried apology as they scooped her up to calm her down. They were more concerned with her tears, her reasons for the outburst, than the fact that she destroyed something that mattered to me. The message was clear. Her immediate needs were more important than anything I felt. That night, After Emily calmed down and everyone else seemed to move on, I was left with a broken console and a growing resentment that no amount of silent brooding could dissipate. I lay in bed, thinking about how unfair it was. Why did her needs come first? Always. Why did that mean I had to be the collateral damage? Over the next few days, I tried to brush off what had happened. I told myself that I was being too sensitive. But the frustration from the incident simmered beneath the surface. And before long, it started to bubble up in other areas of my life. I found myself snapping at small things, withdrawing further into myself. My parents noticed but misinterpreted my mood. They chalked it up to typical teenage angst, school stress, or just another phase I was going through. They suggested maybe I needed more sleep or should talk to someone, like a counselor at school. It felt like another dismissal, another way of saying that my problems weren't as important. It was around this time that I first brought up the idea of family therapy. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was desperate for anything that might help us communicate better. To my surprise, my parents agreed. Maybe they realized things were starting to spiral, or maybe they hoped a professional could smooth over the growing cracks in our family dynamics. Either way, we found ourselves sitting in a sterile, quiet room, facing a therapist who seemed genuinely interested in hearing from each of us. Therapy became part of our weekly routine. At first, it seemed like we might actually make progress. My parents threw themselves into the process with a kind of desperate energy. For a brief moment, it felt like we were making headway. The therapist encouraged us to share our feelings openly, something that had never really happened in our family before. I talked about feeling like an outsider, about the pain of having my needs and interests constantly overlooked. For the first time in a long time, my feelings were acknowledged. It felt liberating to have someone listen, especially since I'd been so used to having my emotions dismissed as just teenage drama. My parents listened too, really listened. They were shocked by how deeply their actions or lack thereof had affected me. There were tears, apologies, and promises to do better. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe that change was possible. Maybe we could find a new normal, one where I wasn't an afterthought. To put those good intentions into practice, we started scheduling more structured family time. It was decided that once a week, we would do something as a family that didn't revolve around Emily's medical needs or preferences. It felt like a small concession, but to me, it meant the world. The first few times were awkward, everyone trying to figure out what to do, how to act, but it was nice. We went to the movies, visited museums, and even spent an afternoon bowling. It was strange, but it was also good. These were activities that had no direct connection to hospitals, therapy, or medical discussions. For once, we were just a family, doing something that made us feel normal. However, Emily didn't take kindly to the change. She had grown accustomed to being the center of attention in our family, and suddenly, we were shifting the focus to something other than her needs. That shift sparked a deep-seated jealousy in her. It started with small comments, subtle digs about how much fun we must have had without her, or how it was nice for her to have some quiet time at home. Her tone was light, but the underlying message was clear. She felt left out, and she wasn't happy about it. The situation escalated quickly. What was supposed to be a calm family dinner turned into an emotional storm. Emily broke down. She accused our parents of neglecting her, of forgetting about her needs in favor of spending time with me. Her reaction was intense, fueled by a mix of genuine fear of being left out and a manipulation tactic she had learned to use effectively. My parents, caught off guard and riddled with guilt, stumbled over themselves to reassure her. They apologized for making her feel that way, but in doing so, they completely shifted their focus back to her. The backlash was immediate. Our scheduled family outings became fewer and farther between, and when they did happen, they were overshadowed by the tension that Emily's displeasure created. My parents were torn. They were trying to balance their newfound commitment to me with their instinctive need to cater to Emily's emotional and physical health. It was a balancing act they simply couldn't manage, and before long, things started to revert to how they had always been. I could see it happening, and I felt the familiar weight of being pushed aside once again. feeling guilty for the turmoil. I suggested maybe we should just go back to how things were before. Maybe it was easier if I just accepted that Emily's needs should always come first. But the therapist, to their credit, pushed back. She pointed out that this reaction was exactly why we were in therapy in the first place, to break these unhealthy patterns, not to reinforce them. So, we continued with the sessions, each one becoming more charged than the last. Emily's feelings of jealousy and abandonment became a central theme. Much of our time was spent addressing her fears and insecurities, while my own feelings of being neglected seemed to fall by the wayside. It felt like we were moving backwards. In a particularly heated session, Emily made a startling accusation. She claimed that our parents were favoring me over her, that they loved me more because I was the normal one. The accusation hit me hard. I wasn't trying to compete with her. I wasn't trying to make her feel guilty for things beyond her control. I just wanted to feel like I mattered, like my needs were as important as hers. But Emily wasn't ready to hear that. She accused me of being selfish for wanting what she saw as equal attention. The words stung. I wasn't fighting for attention. I just wanted to feel like part of the family. When it was my parents' turn to respond, their reaction wasn't what I had hoped for. They started with apologies, as they always did, but quickly shifted to justifying their actions. They explained that Emily's needs weren't just preferences, they were necessities. They said they were doing their best under difficult circumstances. But as they spoke, I realized that this was the pattern that had been repeating for years. My feelings were being dismissed. My desires didn't matter as much as Emily's immediate needs. I was left feeling like the villain in my own family story, simply for wanting the same kind of love and attention that Emily got so freely. I started to withdraw again, pulling away from the therapy sessions, from my efforts to be more present. What was the point? No matter how much I tried to explain myself, it always seemed like my needs were secondary. The breaking point came when my parents, in an attempt to manage Emily's increasing distress, suggested we all switch therapists. They thought a fresh start with a new perspective might help smooth things over, but I saw it for what it was, a way to placate Emily. They were hoping to find someone who would tell them they were doing the right thing by focusing so much on her. I was done trying to fight for attention, done explaining my feelings to people who couldn't seem to grasp how important they were. I was tired of the endless cycle, and I was ready to move on over the next few weeks. I withdrew more and more. I spent more time alone, focusing on school and my own interests outside of home. My parents noticed but seemed unsure how to bridge the growing gap between us. They made tentative attempts to connect, asking about my day or what I had planned for the weekend, but it felt hollow, like too little, too late. Emily also noticed my withdrawal, but her response was mixed. Part of her seemed relieved to have the spotlight firmly back on her, but there was also a flicker of curiosity in her eyes about my newfound independence. She asked me a few times about my activities, but we were both too scarred from the past conflicts to open up again. As the weeks turned into months, I started to look forward to my future with more clarity. I realized I needed to carve my own path, one that didn't involve waiting for my family to recognize my needs. I began researching colleges, scholarships, and programs that interested me, pouring my energy into building a life where I wasn't just a secondary character. I wanted to be the main character in my own story, and it became clearer with each passing day that I couldn't wait for my family to change. My relationship with my parents remained strained. We still spoke, we still shared meals, and we still lived under the same roof. But there was an unspoken understanding that things were different now. My parents continued their focus on Emily, albeit more cautiously in their interactions with me, perhaps afraid of sparking another confrontation. The suggestion to switch therapists came up again, but this time with a more urgent tone. They were hopeful that a new perspective could mend the fractures in our family. But, to me, it felt like agreeing to start a book you already knew the ending of, pointless and exhausting. I declined. I told them it was too late for new beginnings in therapy, that ship had sailed, and I was already looking toward new horizons. They were disappointed, but there was also a resignation in their acceptance. They had missed too many opportunities to make things right. I wasn't angry anymore, just resolved. I was resolved to move forward and prioritize my own well-being. After I moved out and reduced contact with my family, life finally began to feel like mine. I wasn't just the older brother anymore, always sidelined by my sister Emily's needs. I was just me, living my own life, making my own rules in a new city. The decision to go low contact with my family wasn't easy. Family is family, after all. But the constant neglect had taken its toll, and I needed space to figure out who I was outside of that dynamic. At first, the quiet was strange. There was no background noise of Emily's needs or the chaos that usually surrounded them. It was just me and my thoughts, which was both scary and freeing. I found a small apartment, got a job that I didn't mind, and began piecing together a routine that was all my own. When my first birthday came around after the move, I wasn't expecting much, maybe a call, if I was lucky. But the day came and went with silence. No calls, no texts, nothing. It hit harder than I expected. It wasn't like I wanted much, just a sign that they remembered I existed outside of Emily's world. But there was nothing. I spent the day alone, reflecting on everything that had led to this point. It was a sobering reminder of why I had put distance between us, but instead of letting it bring me down, I used it as motivation to invest more into my new life. I started making friends, really good ones. People who showed up for me, who remembered small details and made plans. We'd hang out after work, grab drinks, or just chill at someone's place playing games or watching movies. Little by little, I began to feel part of something again, a community where I wasn't just the other kid. I wasn't just Emily's older brother, I was just me. The next year, when my birthday came around again, I didn't bother checking my phone for missed calls or messages from home. Instead, I planned a big night out with my friends. We hit a couple of bars, laughed more than I had in years, and celebrated until the early hours. It was hands down the best birthday I had ever had. For the first time, I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't just someone being overlooked. I was the main event, and it felt amazing. Days later, curiosity got the better of me, and I called home. Sure enough, they had forgotten again. This time, there wasn't even an apology, just straight into how things were going with Emily. It stung a bit, but it also solidified my resolve that I was doing the right thing by keeping my distance. My life was here now, with people who valued me. By the third year in my new city, my birthday had become something I genuinely looked forward to. I threw another big party, even bigger this time. We rented out a space, had a DJ, the works. It was a blast. Friends, both old and new, showed up to celebrate. Surrounded by people who cared about me, I fully realized the weight of what I had been missing out on all those years. Once again, I made that obligatory call to my family. As expected, they had forgotten my birthday once more. But this time, I didn't even bother bringing it up. We chatted briefly about mundane things, and that was it. That call was short and perfunctory, a stark contrast to the warmth and joy of my celebrations. That call confirmed something for me. While they were my family by blood, my real family was made up of the friends who stood by me. The difference between these relationships was stark. With my friends, I was never an add-on. I was integral. They didn't just remember my birthday, they made it special. They didn't just listen to how my day went, they were a part of my day. We supported each other through job changes, breakups, successes, and failures. We built a network of mutual care and respect. It was something I had always longed for but never quite experienced with my own family. As I stood there, celebrating with my friends, I finally understood that family is more than just who you're born to. It's about the people who choose to stand by you, who see you for who you are, and who invest in the relationship. The family I had longed for, the one I thought I might never have, was finally here, made up of people who valued me, who celebrated me, and who made me feel important every day.